Some stories crawl out of the grave. Others are buried beneath ice and silence. From the bone-dry heart of the Australian outback to the snow-blind trails of Siberia, terror doesn't knock, it waits. Here, we tell the tales that stay with you long after the fire's gone out. Zombies, vanished hikers, unsolved deaths, end-of-the-world whispers that echo through time. This is Aussie After Dark, the place where the line between fact and fear disappears. So light a candle, lock the doors, and don't blink. Because the story you're about to hear might just be true. And if you can take a second to subscribe, it really motivates and helps to continue these stories. Well, anyway, let's join Ethan once more. Also in the comments below, let me know where you're from, and we might just pop up there. The call came in just after 1100 hours. Civilian priority. Tarragindi Heights primary. School zone overrun. Evac required. Multiple hostiles. Corporal Hargreaves didn't flinch. He looked at Talia, who was already relaying the coordinates. His jaw was clenched, eyes scanning the horizon, as if he could see the hell waiting there. "We move in 5, he said. The carrier roared to life, rumbling down the suburban incline toward Tarragindi Heights. The school sat on elevated ground, a post-war brick compound wrapped in cyclone fencing and shade sails. It was supposed to be a temporary evac shelter. Families, kids, teachers who'd drawn the short straw. The plan had been to pull them out at 1400 hours. We were 2 hours too late. As the M113 pulled up to the west gate, we saw the first sign of chaos. A burned-out van half on the curb, its windows clawed from the inside. Blood trailed across the bitumen like someone had been dragged. The gate itself was open, swaying slightly in the wind. "Third section, dismount," Hargreaves ordered. We hit the ground fast, fanning out in standard sweep formation. I stuck behind Mac, rifle up, trauma kit tight to my vest. Sione and Jess took point up the stairs toward the admin block, while Malone posted up with the LSW to cover the oval. Screams echoed faintly from the eastern buildings, the classroom wings. Then a gunshot. 2. "Hostile contact confirmed," Talia said. "We're going in," Mac replied. "Stay sharp." The halls were narrow, cluttered with flipped desks and spilled art supplies. A crayon drawing of a family holding hands was smeared in blood near the doorway. Jess stepped over it, grenade launcher aimed low. We heard the infected before we saw them, rasping breath, scraping feet, something wet hitting linoleum. First contact hit hard. 3 infected burst from the music room, their skin mottled with rot, eyes pale and feral. Sione dropped one with a burst to the chest. The second flailed into Harris, knocking him against the lockers. I shoved forward, catching the infected with my shoulder and pulling it back. Harris stabbed upward with his bayonet, the blade punching through its jaw with a sick crack. Jess spun, catching the third in the knee with a round from her launcher. It buckled, shrieked, and crawled, dragging a snapped leg behind it until Malone finished it from the hallway. "Clear left," Mac barked. We swept the next corridor, then kicked through the fire door into the library. 6 civilians, 3 kids, 2 teachers, 1 parent, all huddled behind a barricade of bookshelves. The kids were crying. The teachers were white with terror. I moved fast, kneeling beside the smallest boy. "You hurt?" He shook his head, but didn't speak. "We're getting you out," I said. Malone and Vucic covered the door, while I treated a teacher with a dislocated shoulder. She'd taken a fall during the initial panic. I popped it back with a single, painful motion. She screamed, then nodded thanks. Outside, the radio barked again. "Multiple infected, east side, moving toward the gym. They're coming through the fence." "We need that roof extraction," Hargreaves said. "Talia, signal HQ. Get that Black Hawk in the air. Caldwell, get those civilians ready to move. The stairwell to the roof was blocked with debris. Jess and Mac cleared it with a breaching charge, the blast echoing like thunder. We moved fast. Halfway up the stairs, they came again. 5 of them this time. One was a teacher, still in a collared shirt, her throat torn open. She screeched as she lunged. Sione fired and slipped on blood, barely dodging her teeth. I pulled him back and emptied my rifle into her chest until she dropped. Mac took a bite to the arm, just a scratch through the sleeve. Enough to scare us, not enough to break skin. We reached the roof as the chopper descended. Rotor wash kicked up dust and papers. The kids cried harder. The parents screamed for someone we couldn't see. Malone laid down suppressive fire from the rooftop's edge as infected flooded into the gym below. We saw them tearing into bodies. One looked up, screamed, ran for the stairwell. Go! Hargreaves covered the evac, firing until his rifle clicked empty. We lifted the civilians into the bird one by one. Last one in, I turned and saw Jess hauling Harris up with one arm. She grinned through blood. Told you I'd earn those kill markers. The bird lifted. The school was burning, and the city below us was getting darker. But we were alive, for now. The air had changed. It was something in the wind, sharp, wet, carrying with it the kind of rot that didn't belong in a functioning city. Camp Juliet buzzed with motion as civilians continued to arrive, limping, coughing, shouting. We'd taken in close to 200 over the past 12 hours. Families, paramedics, even 2 cops from Moruca who'd walked 6 kilometers on foot, covered in blood that wasn't theirs. Command said we were holding, but holding felt a lot like waiting. I sat by the triage tent, washing blood from my forearms. Most of it wasn't fresh. A lot of it wasn't even human. Jess strolled past, chewing gum she found in someone's bug-out bag. Hey, Doc, you hear the chatter from HQ? I looked up. Number what? Command's blacking out suburbs, she said. Lockdowns. Whole blocks shut down. No comms in or out. They reckon Carindale's gone dark. I paused, wiped the water off. Gone dark? She nodded. Whatever's happening, it ain't isolated anymore. Just then, the order came down. 3rd section, prepare to mobilize. Objective, Glenview Aged Care Facility, Tarragindi Heights. No contact from staff. Possible civilians inside. Extract and escort to Camp Juliet. We were moving again. 13:25 hours. Glenview Aged Care. The facility sat quiet beneath a bruised sky, its pale brick wall streaked with rain and grime. No fire, no signs of looting, no sound either. That was the part that itched. We dismounted a block out, moved in on foot. The neighborhood was empty. Cars parked at odd angles, laundry frozen mid-sway, garden hoses still dripping. Malone took point with Mac, LSW at the ready. Hargreaves directed the rest of us into a staggered approach. I stuck close to Sione and Harris, rifle up, breath slow. Talia tried the comms again. Glenview Facility. This is ADF Bravo Company. We're here to assist with evacuation. Please respond. Static. Try internal PA, Hargreaves said. We breached the front doors. Inside, the stench hit like a hammer. Not blood, not death, just decay. Rotting food. Unwashed sheets, and something sour, like bile that had dried on linoleum. The foyer was empty. Chairs overturned. A wheelchair lay in the corner, rusted red at the handles. No movement. Vucic swept left with Jess. Mac and Malone took right. Sione found the admin office. I went with him. The blinds were down. The computers, still on. One screen showed security footage. Halls empty, doors ajar. Then the feed cut to black. Movement, Jess's voice snapped over the radio. "South Hall. Looks like residents." We regrouped, moved as one. Down long, yellowed corridors lined with faded paintings of gum trees and kookaburras. The lights flickered above, casting shadows that moved even when we didn't. We found them in the dining room. 8 residents, all seated, all still. 2 still. A bowl of soup had spilled and dried on one table. One man stared at it, unmoving, lips slack. A woman sat across from him, hands curled like claws around a butter knife. "A DF," Mac called out, stepping forward. "We're here to evacuate. Can anyone stand?" No response. Then the man twitched. I saw it in his neck, just a flicker of muscle, like a dry jerk of a puppet string. Then his jaw snapped wide open, and he let out a gurgling moan that sent every hair on my neck upright. The woman across from him lunged. "Contact!" Malone fired. Her LSW barked in short, brutal bursts, too loud in the confined space. The dining room exploded into chaos. 2 more residents lunged, mouths stretched unnaturally wide, arms clawing. We opened fire. Vucic took one to the ground and kept shooting until it stopped moving. Jess hit one square in the chest with a beanbag grenade, barely phased it. They weren't fast, but they were relentless. No pain, no hesitation, just blind rage and gnashing teeth. One of them got close, too close to Harris. It slammed into him, sending him crashing into a drinks cart. I was already moving. Tourniquet just in case. Blood, but not a bite. Just a glass shard in his side. I patched him while Malone stood guard, breathing like a bull. "You good?" I barked. Harris winced. "I'm fine." That bastard smelled like old beer and death. We swept the rest of the facility. 16 infected, all elderly, but not all of them were turned. In one room, we found a woman hiding beneath her bed, shaking, covered in blood that wasn't hers. She was the only one we saved. 15:30 hours. Extraction. Back at Camp Juliet, the woman sat wrapped in blankets, sipping tea with trembling hands. She couldn't tell us much, only that the staff had locked the residents in once the first infection hit. And then, they just stopped coming. Talia sat beside her, whispering quietly. Sione passed her his ration bar. I stood beside the perimeter, staring out at the city skyline. Smoke now drifted from multiple suburbs. Emergency broadcasts filled the airwaves. The comms tower downtown was silent. Behind me, Hargreaves approached. His voice was quiet. "It's starting." I nodded. "Yeah. I think this is it. 17:30 hours. Camp Juliet. It started with the wind again. It carried something unnatural. Wet, rotting, sharp as copper on the tongue. The sun was setting behind clouds of ash, bathing Camp Juliet in blood-orange haze. The civilians knew before we did. They weren't trained, weren't drilled, but somehow they felt it. They clutched their children tighter, pulled closer to the perimeter, eyes darting westward, where the sky burned darker than it should have. Jess whispered, "Smells like rain." But it wasn't rain. It was the smell of them. 1800 hours. Southern Gate. The call came over the comms. Multiple infected. West and south approaches. Estimated count. Over 100. Moving fast. This is not a drill. Tatlia's voice cracked as she relayed HQ. Alpha Company's not coming. Roads gone. Air support rerouted. We're it. Corporal Hargreaves turned, eyes cold beneath his helmet. "Third section. Hold the south. No one breaches that line." We ran. Malone and Mac hauled the LSW and spare belts to the sandbagged gun nests. Jess popped smoke canisters and primed her launcher. Sione laid out claymores. Harris mounted the FNMAG on a tripod, hand steady despite the tremor in his jaw. I slung my trauma kit to my chest and ducked beside them. The oval had turned red. The floodlights buzzed to life. Beyond them, through the tree line, they came. Dozens, then more. Shambling, then sprinting, clawing at each other in hunger, eyes glowing in the dusk. Some were still in hospital gowns, others in footy gear. All of them wrong. Veins black, mouths frothing, hungry. Hargreaves roared. "Engage!" The line erupted. Malone's LSW hammered into the swarm, chewing flesh from bone. Harris swept the FN mag in brutal arcs, brass clinking into piles. The air turned to fire, rifles barking, smoke thick, tracer rounds glowing through the haze. Jess launched an HE round. It exploded just behind the front line, sending limbs skyward. But they didn't stop. They climbed over their dead. I saw one leap onto the barrier. Mac shot it point blank in the jaw. Its skull didn't explode. It just kept screaming until Jess took its head clean off with a slug. Sione muttered a prayer, then triggered the first claymore. It blew apart 6 of them, legs gone, chests flayed wide open. Still they came. Then the second barrier broke. 2 infected slipped through a breach near the cricket nets. They were fast, too fast. One was on Jess before I could shout. She screamed, fought like hell, her launcher between them. I drew my sidearm and fired. 1, 2, 3 shots to the head. The thing folded backward, twitching. Jess scrambled to her feet, bleeding from the arm but alive. "I'm fine," she spat. "Reloading!" Another lunged from Malone, tackled her behind the sandbags. The LSW went spinning. She rolled, drew her bayonet, and stabbed it under the jaw with a grunt that came from the core of her being. I got to her seconds later. "You bit." She shook her head. "Try me." Command shouted fallback orders. Evac birds inbound. ETA 20 minutes. We held until the second barrier collapsed entirely. Then came the fallback. Talia helped guide civilians toward the landing zone. Kids screamed. Women wailed. Harris stayed at the rear, dropping every target that got within 50 meters. By the med tent, we took our final stand. Dozens of infected now swarmed the oval. The ground looked alive with them. Hargreaves took a blow to the shoulder, fractured, not bitten, but kept firing with his left hand. Mac manned the mag. "If I die," he shouted, "I want Jess to delete my browsing history." "Not happening," she yelled back, reloading. The first Black Hawk dropped down like a bird of war. Wind, noise, screaming rotors. We pushed the last evacuees toward the tailgate. One infected, a girl no older than 16, came from the left. She looked so human. I leveled my rifle and fired. Twice. She dropped like the rest. The second bird landed. Smoke now blanketed half the camp. The generator failed. Floodlights died. We loaded the last civilians and carried Hargreaves on board. Mac jumped in with Jess at the ramp. Harris covered the final sprint with Sione. Talia was the last on, face pale, rifle bloody. I climbed in, coughing, gear soaked in black gore. The Black Hawk lifted. As we rose above the wreckage of Camp Juliet, I looked down. We had held the line. But the city had not.